So it's 2026 and you haven't thought about podcasting in the classroom. Let's talk about this and some of the reasons why podcasting could be a fantastic way to incorporate lots of different technology, but also getting student voice active in your classroom. Hi everybody, my name is Tristan Heron. I am an education, innovation and growth specialist, and I am here to help you embrace educational technology to create those future-focused classrooms. All right, so let's talk today about podcasting. If you don't know what podcasting is just a really simple way of providing audio, voice-related, basically recordings that we can share with people through a variety of different methods and platforms. So you might be someone who is really big into listening to podcasts and you love listening to podcasts. You might be listening to them through Spotify, maybe Apple Music, maybe you're listening to them through YouTube Music or Amazon. There are so many different ways that you can access and, enjoy a variety of different podcasts. Podcasts don't have to be big and edited and fancy like you might hear on some of these platforms. Podcasts can be just something really simple that you could create using your mobile phone, doing a little voice recording like this, and then sharing your ideas and opinions with the world. So podcasting doesn't have to be big and formulated and something that is going to be highly productive. So let's talk about how we could use podcasting in the classroom, because I think it's a really simple, really cool method that we could use not only in the classroom, but also potentially with our colleagues and even our school community. So I'm going to start off here by talking about one example from my own teaching career where we used a podcast style activity as part of a Year 11 assessment task. Now, I think this is one of the best assessments that we have ever used and implemented at my particular school with Year 11. And we know that today kids do not like to talk in front of each other. They do not like to speak in front of each other. I remember at school, we had to have speaking tasks where you would stand up in front of the class and you would deliver a 2, 3, 4, 5, however many minute speech in front of your peers and your teacher, and that would be what you'll be marked on. Well, we know today that anxiety is a real thing. I know that, I get that, but we need to be able to talk. We need to be able to communicate in front of other people. Look, hell, I'm here right now recording a video to you, sometimes sounding like a complete absolute idiot, but here I am doing it with confidence, not worrying if I stumble or make a mistake. I'm just going to keep persevering and going. Yes, I am a little bit older than the students I teach, but that's not the point, all right? So stop judging me. So what we did is we got our students to create a podcast in pairs based on the text that we were studying in class. Let me just say, this was outstanding. The quality of work that we got was great. We got some really simple podcasts that were just students who were just recording and talking to each other like kind of an interview setup. We also got some more polished podcasts where we had things like sound effects, we had intros and outros, and we had all of those elements that you might find in a much more polished, published podcast that you might listen to. But it was great because the level of engagement was absolutely outstanding, and I really enjoyed sitting down with my co-teacher and listening to these and seeing what our students actually created. So by moving from something where we're getting them to speak in front of the class to incorporating technology to create a podcast, we are now getting our students to incorporate so many different skills that they are going to need and be able to use in their future. So there's one example of how I have used podcasting in the classroom. I've used it to replace some kind of speaking task, so preventing and eliminating that kind of anxiety of having to speak in front of people and getting my students to actually record their speech or their presentation and submit that as a podcast. Another really great way that we could use podcasting in the classroom is maybe we as a teacher are providing some instructions or some detail about an assignment or a workshop, or we're providing an outline of the module or topic that we're studying. So rather than having to repeat ourselves over and over again, because we know that sometimes students aren't always going to be in class on the day that we are introducing these things, we could actually create a podcast. We could pop that onto our platform, we could pop that onto Google Classroom, We could pop that into a Google site. There are so many different ways that we could actually use this kind of idea to create and share information that our young people will be able to access in their own time. Another really cool way that we could use podcasting could be creating a podcast that is student-led. And maybe it is school focused, maybe it's looking at a particular year group, maybe it's celebrating something that's just happened, like maybe a sporting achievement, maybe we've had some kind of, pajama day, some kind of day where we are doing some fundraising. Maybe we have our student representative councils or the equivalent based on where you are. Maybe they have a podcast that they produce weekly, monthly, maybe they have one a term. But how cool would that be? A student-led podcast where we could get our students involved in creating content that we can share and promote to our school community, and we can share with other students. We could also use podcasting with our school community. So maybe instead of having some kind of written newsletter, or maybe you're using Sway or Canva, maybe we have some kind of podcast type newsletter which provides a weekly overview of what's been happening. Maybe you incorporate some examples of some of the different things that have been happening in classroom to introduce teachers and staff and SLSOs and aides and all these kind of people. How cool would that be to have a weekly, fortnightly, monthly podcast that you share on your socials? Once again, there's so many ways that you could use podcasts in the classroom that it's really only limited by your imagination. Another couple examples could be maybe we get our students to create some very short podcasts to summarize a chapter of a novel or a chapter of a textbook or a module that we have just studied in class. Maybe we get our students to create some kind of vocabulary, little mini podcasts where we're talking about some different language, some meta language, some vocab, some definitions, some real world examples. That would be really cool, actually. So if I was there whipping up a lesson, getting some students to create some, looking at some of those terms. I'm an English teacher, so let's go simile, metaphor, personification, oxymoron, hyperbole. That would be really cool. Okay, so really simple. And such an easy way to do this. Maybe you're a maths teacher and maybe you're looking at a really complex task. So maybe you record a little podcast going through this task, this particular formula. I don't know, I'm not a maths teacher, okay? Definitely not a maths teacher. But maybe you create a podcast that goes through and your students can then also watch. Another really cool way here is that, did you know that podcasts don't always just now have to be obviously this oral kind of presentation? There are lots of visual podcasts out there now as well. So you could actually double fist this, and you could actually create this using a phone like I am right now. You could be using your webcam, and you could actually have kind of two versions. You could have your visual version where you're actually showing them how to do something, and then you could actually have and upload your oral version, okay, so that version that people could listen to. How cool would that be? So actually doubling the amount of content that you're creating just by doing one thing. So there's so many ways that you can use podcasts in the classroom. Again, limited by your imagination. I have said that so many times recently because it's true, okay? Everything needs a purpose, everything needs a point, but everything can be achieved if you just think about what you want to do and why you want to do it. But podcasts, I think, are underrated in the classroom, and I think they are a tool, they are a method, they are something that anyone can try and incorporate to really develop that engagement and to create those future ready skills that our students need as they move into their future. All right, if you want to learn more and you want to become a future-ready classroom teacher, so making sure that our students are ready for the future, we'd love it if you came over and joined our membership academy, the Empowered Educator Hub. There you'll find a whole heap of support. There's lots of videos, there's lots of PDFs, there's all different kinds of things to help you with EdTech in the classroom so that you can develop those future-ready skills in our students. So if you want to find out more about that, just head over to tristanheron.com/hub. All right, thank you so much for joining us today, looking at podcast in the classroom. Don't forget to join us again very soon. Until then, bye.